Tim Sweeten, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. We're having a little live streaming technical difficulty, which we think we've got resolved now. Thank you so much. My name is David Levy. I am a co-founder of True Theater, and we are so grateful for you to be here with us for the first show of our 13th season. Is there anybody here who's at their very first True Theater show ever? I'm going to have to hear your... God willing, there will be 13 more. So please come back. We look forward to it. And by the way, this building, if you're not familiar, is the beautifully restored downtown Cincinnati's Memorial Hall, which we have been so proud to call our home for the past few years. The staff here makes us feel welcome, the tech problem that was happening was not theirs, and we're just so grateful to them. We want to give a round of applause to everybody at Memorial Hall. We also want to thank Norse Media, the Northern Kentucky University's media organization that is student-run, for sponsoring the equipment rental that's bringing out tonight's live stream. That makes live streaming of this show affordable for us and feasible, which is really terrific. And their students are operating the system. It's also not their fault that the sound it was a mystery, and the mystery is cleared up. So thank you also to Norse Media for that sponsorship. Yeah. I will say that while their sponsorship does make the live streaming affordable, we are not without expenses. And so, this is the point in the show, one of a few actually, I hope you'll bear with us, where we talk about how you can donate money to our nonprofit 501c3 organization that is True Theater. The simplest way is to text the code TRUE13 to the number 44321 on your phone. You'll get a link back, and you follow that, and the rest is self-explanatory. So, you know, if you think about it, I know that some of you at home are probably watching for free. So, you know, if at the end of the show you feel like that was worth some money, and I know you will, please consider donating. And even like if everybody here donated $10, if everybody who could hear my voice right now donated $10, I think we'd get $1,000 for the evening. Well, okay, so I don't really expect that to happen, but that's how money works. All right, I'm just showing off my math skills now. Anyway, so really terrific to have you all here. Feel free to donate, and again, I'm going to remind you of that later on. Ooh, there's a fun game going on tonight. Some of you may have gotten a bingo card, which if I had remembered to bring it out, I would display for you right now, but it's 5x4 grid of things about people that if you chat with your neighbor and discover that they match one of the characteristics, you get their name and you write it in. You're trying to get 4 or 5 in a row, depending if you're going horizontally or diagonally or vertically. And sometime in Act 2, we are going to like draw some names of some winners. Oh, I've got a visual aid for you right now. Like just in case you couldn't envision what I was talking about. Here it is. And if you want one of these and haven't had a chance to grab one, there's a little stack right on the other side of the lip of the stage here. Our friend Ramona, who will be carrying them around in a basket at intermission, and fill them out and turn them in. You could drop them in a basket here, give them back to Ramona, and at some point in Act 2, we'll draw some out and offer some free tickets to some people who've played our game of bingo. So it's not exactly luck-based, but bingo, luck. So there's the theme. All right, folks, we've got some other great shows coming up for you in the rest of our season, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later. I don't think they're on the screen good, so I don't have to talk about them now. But the theme for tonight's show is luck. And whenever I think about luck, I can't help but think about the Chinese parable of the farmer whose horse runs away right before planting season. His neighbors all say, oh, that's really bad luck. He says, yeah, good luck, bad luck, who can tell? And then 2 days later, the horse comes back, and it's trailing with it 2 wild horses that he can train to help with the planting. And the neighbor's like, oh, what good luck. You have 3 horses now to help with the planting. Good luck, bad luck, who can tell? His only son goes out riding on one of these new horses, falls off, breaks his leg. The neighbors, oh, how unlucky. Now he won't be there to help you with the planting for the season. Good luck, bad luck, who can tell? And then the emperor sends brigades to all the towns to round up the oldest son from each family to come fight in an impending war. And when they look at his son and they see the broken leg, they say, "Pass." Well, a lot of the other neighbors are waving goodbye to their sons, not knowing if they're ever going to see them again. They tell him, "What good fortune you have, what good luck that he couldn't be taken away." Good luck, bad luck, he says. Who can tell? Luck comes in many shapes and varieties. Some people believe in it, some people don't. Some people rely on it. Some people are lucky, some people seem unlucky. What you're going to hear tonight are 5 stories that approach this theme of luck from several different directions. And we say at True Theater that everybody has a story to tell, and the only difference between strangers and friends is the sharing of that story. And tonight, you're going to make 5 new friends. Our first loves the outdoors, leading retreats, sailing, and she's proud of growing and keeping her sourdough starter alive for 2 years. That is more than I was able to do. She is not into titles, but certainly has them. She's a proud mom of 3, best-selling author, a speaker, and has a background in psychology and education for students with neurodivergent issues. Terrific. She's also a certified Montessori teacher and a life coach, and has been supporting her clients for over 13 years, even longer than True Theater has been bringing great stories to you like hers. Please welcome Star Staubach.
Some people say that I'm lucky. I guess maybe I am. I like to find 4-leaf clovers. In fact, I'm often found when I'm out in the grass looking down, searching for them. I find so many that I tend to leave them behind, as if I'm just letting that luck be found by someone else. But you know what? 7 years ago, despite what it looked like on the outside, I was speaking on big stages and I had amazing clients. I had a wonderful, loving family and a supportive husband. I didn't feel so lucky. In fact, it felt as if I had a rain cloud just hanging over my head, an elephant sitting on my chest at all times, constricted. The tears would flow and I didn't understand why. None of the tools that I knew to fix it were working. It was around about this time I had a particularly hard day. I was scheduled to be at a business networking meeting. The name of my business at the time, Ignite Radiance. I didn't feel so radiant. I just wanted to crawl under my covers and hide. It was my husband who encouraged me, "Sweetheart, maybe you should go. Just enjoy. Let them take care of you this time. Have fun." It was his encouragement that made me take a shower that day and get dressed and put the makeup on, like a mask. Maybe I can cover it up. Before I left the house, I went to my office to collect my business cards. And my eyes landed on my crystal ball. That's what I want to bring with me to this business meeting. I just want to play. I don't want to be the polished life coach today. I can't do that. So I decided this was coming with me. The entire drive there, 20 minutes it took me to get there, and the tears wouldn't stop. During this time, singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with my middle daughter, and she said, "Mommy, you're like my diamond in the sky." That joy was there for a second, but it slipped through my fingers as quick as those words left her mouth. I couldn't hold on to it. Here I am in the parking lot now, looking in the mirror, And it's the messy face. You know the face, nothing you're gonna do is fixing you, sweetheart. Like no amount of water you're splashing on that, no amount of reapplying your makeup is gonna help. You're gonna be seen exactly where you are. So I take a big deep breath and I go in. My dear friend happens to be the person who greets me as I walk in the door. And she can see it all over my face. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. You want to talk about it? I can't talk about it. I don't even know what I would talk about. I don't know why these tears keep streaming. You want a glass of wine? She says. Yeah, I want a glass of wine. Do you want to sit with me? Yes, I want to sit with you. And we grabbed a hold of all the strongest women in the room and the women I felt the safest with, and I stacked my table with that strength. We're about to sit down for dinner, and I decided to get out my crystal ball. Now, I had just been asked by my life coach, hey, Star, what are your big goals for the year? What do you want to accomplish? What do I want to accomplish? The first thing that came to mind, I just want to run away. Is that an option? Because that's what I want to do. And it was with this question just kind of sitting there that I decided I wanted to play a game that night with the ladies at the table with me, and I said, join me. If you could have anything you wanted, like if this crystal ball, by the way, it's just a paperweight. Like, I know. People ask me all the time, like, do you really think it has powers? Here's what I think it does. It helps me to suspend the rules I think I have to live by in this reality. What if, just for a second, I could suspend them? What if I could see inside of it a future, a big wish, a big dream? And this is what I asked the ladies at the table with me. Will you dream big with me? What would it be? What would it be if you asked your heart right now what you want? And I said the biggest damn thing I could think of. I said Paris. Kid-free. With my husband for my 40th birthday. Whew, that felt amazing. Suddenly my constricted heart was like, whoa, that feels good. The ball traveled around the table, and as it went to each woman sitting at the table, which, by the way, ladies, we hold it right here. I hold it right here. I don't want my big wish to burden somebody else. And as it went around the table, I could feel the constriction again, the reality. We have 3 kids, and I'm still nursing a baby, and although he might be ready to be weaned, he's not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And we don't have a bank account that says, hey, go to Paris, have fun, enjoy. My husband and I are the only caregivers to my 90-year-old father-in-law. This is the reality that I felt as the ball traveled around the table, and it landed right next to me. To the woman who was the speaker that night, she happened to be away when I asked for Paris, my big wish. She didn't hear it, so she was maybe surprised by the squeals that took place at the table as she went to get a designer packet of tissues out of her purse to wipe her stuffy nose. Oh my God, Star, it's a sign. Look at her tissues, look. Stars and the Eiffel Tower printed right there on her tissues. It's a sign. You're meant to go to Paris, Star. It's going to happen. Whew, there it was again. The constriction gone. I felt it again. It felt like I could touch it just for a second. I brought that story home to my husband. My husband and I, he is my rock, solid, makes plans step by step. Hey, honey, guess what we can do? I have this big plan. This is our dynamic, right? So I take this home to him. I'm so glad that you had fun tonight. I'm so glad that you have this story to share. I'm so glad that you got to feel that joy again. But we know our circumstances, right? Like Paris is impossible for us right now, but let's keep it on the back burner, maybe. Okay, so later that week, we're going to have dinner with some friends we haven't seen in quite a while. My purse is really heavy. It's really heavy because this is really heavy. And I was just lazy and didn't take it out of my purse. And I was laughing, approaching the dinner table, and my friends are like, what's going on? And I told them I had a crystal ball in my purse, and they were like, of course, you would have a crystal ball in your purse, of all of our friends. Why? Why do you have it in there? And I told them the story that I just told you. And my friend leaned across the table, and he said, you do know we have a timeshare in Paris, right? What? No? I didn't know that you have a timeshare. No wonder we don't see you very often. So now my husband is listening. He likes to have all the steps in a row. Huh. It's only $150 for the week. Right? I mean, who's ready to take that deal? And it's 3 miles from the Eiffel Tower. My friend checks the app on his phone, and he says, you know what, Star? It's available January 9th through the 16th. My birthday is January 10th. Is this really happening? Is it possible? Again, now my husband's listening, and the planner, starts to kick in. We should start to look into flights. Any of you who love traveling in the room probably already know this, but we discovered that the only international direct flight out of Cincinnati is to Paris. Whoa. Oh, and by the way, in our Delta Sky Miles points, there's 50,000 Sky Mile points sitting there because we haven't been anywhere with 3 kids and a father-in-law to care for. My mom graciously agreed to care for my father-in-law. While we were still sitting at dinner that night, I texted my dad really quick and said, hey, Dad, we're thinking about Paris in January for my birthday. Any chance you want to hang out with the kids? And he shot an immediate response. They can either come to Michigan or we'll come there, make it happen. Book a trip. What? That Christmas, my husband got an unprecedented bonus from work. It was as if the universe was now saying, go, have fun, be taken care of, and enjoy. Some of you have already put the dots together. I was a little slow on the uptake. I didn't realize at the time that what I was struggling with was postpartum depression. What I didn't know is that I would need an ocean to separate and to remove myself from it enough to be able to see. Before we left, the kids are in Michigan. We're leaving later that night. And I called my dad. I had that constriction again in my heart, the guilt. I just felt like I don't want to burden anybody else with my big dream. I don't want to put anybody else out. Dad quickly answered the phone. He said, hey, good morning. I was just sitting down to write you an email. The kids were up 4 times last night. There it is again. What have I done? What have I done to my kids? What have I done to my dad? The tears start rolling. And Dad says, you know, I just feel so lucky. I feel so lucky that I got to be the one to be up with them through the night. I got to be the one to comfort them. I got to be the one to see they know they're safe here. And then the tears rolled. On my 40th birthday, January 10th, I took a 3-mile run to the Eiffel Tower. And I got to hear the church bells. It was a Sunday. And I got to smell the wine being corked and the charcuterie boards being put out from the little vintage cars as they pop open their boot for a little gathering in Paris. My husband secretly collected trinkets throughout Paris to remind me of how much he loves me. I feel pretty lucky. People say I'm lucky. My luck brought upon luck for my kiddos who got to have 10 days of being spoiled by Grandma and Grandpa. I didn't think they would want me to come home. They can't miss you until you're gone, and they missed me. It took that ocean for me to reconnect with myself, for me to see star again, for me to be able to see that I had sunk really far and I needed help. That luck transferred to my dad and my stepmom, who got to, at the beginning he said it was luck. I don't know, maybe it was exhaustion by 10 days later. My husband got to experience that luck with me. And then we later did really big things. He became a dreamer too. People say, I'm lucky. Paris, kid-free for my 40th birthday. Thank you.
One more time for Star. Never lucky enough to win the Powerball, our next storyteller is a professor. A professor of electronic media and broadcasting in the School of Media and Communication in the College of Informatics at Northern Kentucky University, the same department that produced the students running tonight's live stream. Academically and creatively, and even in his free time, he focuses on media aesthetics, digital cinema, and creating media internationally. On a personal level, he's Kim's husband and Zoa's dad. Please welcome Chris Strobel.
I never really believed in luck. I understand the concept and that sometimes things happen that you don't intend and it's good, and so, that's luck. But I don't think that, anybody or anything is lucky or not lucky. I think it's really more all of a perspective. Because what may seem like it's bad luck at one time or for someone may be good luck for someone else or at a different time. It's all kind of a spectrum. It's yin and it's yang. Well, when I was in high school, I was a tennis player, and I was a 4-year letterman. And before you think that's really good, for high school tennis teams, you need 7 players, and my high school had 6. And my best friend, or one of my best friends, he was the star, so I became lucky number 7. Let's just say I learned on the job. And no one would ever confuse me for Bjorn Borg. For any young folks in the audience, Bjorn Borg was kind of a Roger Federer for my time. Well, by my senior year, as we all do, I wanted to go to prom with my girlfriend, and I don't know, if you've gone to prom, you know that that's kind of expensive. There's a tux, and I wanted to go to the best restaurant in town because we were going to be taking her 1965 mint condition cherry red Mustang hardtop on this. Yeah, it was nice. But that also meant I needed to be top notch, and that meant I needed some money. So I got myself a summer job, and I was delivering papers on a bike route. And when you're jumping on and off of a bike, sometimes injuries happen. And so one day I was going to the restroom, actually, and I was at the urinal, and there was kind of a thump. Okay, that's weird. So I kind of feel around, and my right testicle is like 3 inches long and rock hard. I'm like, that's different. But it didn't hurt. So I kind of forgot about it and just ignored it for the rest of the summer until I had to get my physical to play tennis. And so I passed that physical, including the lovely turn your head and cough. And the doctor was standing up and was like, hey, all right, Doc, can you take another look down here? Because I think I bruised myself jumping on off a bike and it's not gone away. And he was like, oh, okay. He examines me. And he stands up, he looks me in the eye, and he turns and he walks out of the room. I was like, okay, I'm going to pull up my pants, wait here for a little bit. He walked back in, he said, first thing tomorrow, you have an appointment with your urologist, because it wasn't a bruise. It was cancer, testicular cancer. Yeah, I was 17 years old. Now, testicular cancer is rare. There's like 10,000 cases diagnosed every year. But it's also the most common type of cancer for men aged 15 to 35. It continues past 35 because other cancers pass it up. It's still prevalent. It's also one of the most, nowadays at least, one of the most curable kinds of cancer that's out there if you catch it early. So, all the men out there, you should be doing a monthly self-exam. Just like a woman does a breast exam, you should be doing a testicular exam. All of you. Or, find a partner and, help each other out, great. Whatever gets it done, great. But I didn't have that opportunity. For me, I had cancer, and it had to come out. So I learned a new word. Did you know that the removal of a testicle is called an orchiectomy? Yeah, it is. And, if you have an orchiectomy, then it's all right because, it's like why you've got 2 lungs, you've got 2 kidneys, 2 eyes, whatever. You can function okay with just 1. I also learned that there are 5 different kinds of testicular cancer. And my right testicle was basically just a big old hotbed of seminoma. Now, seminoma is like the weakest of the cancers, the most curable. It's slow, treated with radiation. It's like, cool, that's great. I could do this. Well, they're poking around, getting ready to, figure out what the treatment's going to be, and they notice something weird because they notice that there's some tumors on my left side, and if I have cancer in my right testicle, my right lymph nodes should be where those tumors are spreading. So they poke around a little bit more, and you know what they found. A little bitty tumor on my left testicle. Bad to worse luck. Because that wasn't seminoma. That's what's called embryonal cell carcinoma. And that is aggressive and tough. It spreads fast, and you need chemotherapy to be able to treat it. And it had spread. I had a tennis ball-sized tumor next to my left kidney, tumors around my lungs. I was stage 3. Nothing had entered a organ yet, but it was close. But that original tumor needed to come out. So, a few more surgeries later, and a bilateral orchiectomy, I was ready to enter chemotherapy. Now, we lived in the vicinity of the absolute best place in the world to be treated for testicular cancer. The IU Med Center in Indianapolis was the place. I mean, seriously, there was a sheik and his son had testicular cancer, and so he flew him to the best place in the world, and he landed and checked in the same day that I did. We drove for an hour. It was great. Well, and the reason that the sheik and I were there was that we were at the tail end of a experimental cancer chemotherapy treatment. And I was producing really good results, which has produced the cure rate that we have now. And that was all through the research and the mind of Dr. Lawrence Einhorn. And Einhorn is, he's responsible. His research is responsible for people like John Kruk and Lance Armstrong, me. Hundreds of thousands of men are alive because of his work. But But the chemotherapy's rough. You can get through it, but it's rough. I was in the hospital for a week at a time, had 3 weeks off in between to recuperate. And I did that for 4 weeks, 4 sessions in the hospital. I don't really remember too much in the hospital. I mean, my parents were there. I understand my girlfriend probably visited me. But I don't know, because I just had this death chemicals just pumped into my body. And that's what chemotherapy is, right? It's poison that kills fast-growing cells like cancer, fingernails, hair. Yeah. My mom, when I was at home, she would gather the hair that fell off my head from my pillow each morning. I'd be in class, and I'd pull it out and drop it, and pull it out and drop it. And it's because I was in class the next day. I mean, I was healthy besides the cancer, and I'd get out of the hospital and go to school. I even played tennis. I was actually undefeated. Remember, 4-year letterman, undefeated my last year, because the coach put me in against the worst team in the conference. But we won, so, you know. Sorry. But I also needed to I wasn't stupid. I realized that if I didn't find that original large testicle full of cancer that showed me the other kind of cancer that was eating my body away, I'd probably be dead by graduation. But I did find it, and I did have the treatment. And then on Friday the 13th of December 1985, the day I was supposed to be opened up and have all of my lymph nodes removed, they told me to go home because my last CAT scan came back clean. And I was cancer-free. Yeah. My hair came back in. It had a different texture. It was had more body. I went from glasses to contacts. I had this whole new look just in time for prom. It was great. It worked out well. But, you know, life throws you a curve there. And I was going to be going to college. I was planning to go for a string theory, quantum mechanics. So my dad was a chemist, and I liked the sciences, but I really thought I wanted to go into theoretical physics, light, sound, and, you know, teach that. But then cancer came along and made me realize, oh, life can be short, and that takes a long time to get into to research and make an impact on the world. And I could work with light and sound and maybe make movies, and that sounds a lot more fun. So I went that way, and I've immersed myself into it. By my junior year of college, I was shooting and editing corporate videos and directing the weekend newscasts at WTWO, NBC affiliate in our town. When I graduated a couple years later, I became the production manager. I had 13 employees for us, and we made all the media there. And before I left, I was able to create a kids show, a live-action educational show that aired against national cartoon programming, and we actually won our time slot. I was able to make an impact. But you know what? The most impactful time for me at TV2 was when the first time I did the Labor Day telethon, and I met the new MDA coordinator. Now, the old folks probably remember what the telethon is for young folks. We used to do like an all-weekend television show. We didn't go off the air, and we were raising money to fight muscular dystrophy. Well, this new MDA coordinator, she was interesting. And I was very magnanimous, And I told the crew that I'd scheduled for the overnight shift that they should just go home. I'll take it for them. And Kim and I talked all night. And by the end of the night, I knew that she was the one. And so I needed her to know on our first date that with the way I'm feeling, before this goes any farther, that I was special. I didn't just have a orchiectomy, I had a bilateral, and I cannot father children. And she said, oh, that's okay, we can adopt. But I do have a question, yeah? Can you have sex? Yeah. 4 months later, we were engaged. And next year, we'll have our 30th anniversary. Our lives moved pretty quickly after that. We moved to the East Coast so I could go to grad school to get the degree to be able to teach. I went to film school and started a company, a film company, moved back to Cincinnati, did that for 4 years, started to teach adjunct at Southern Ohio College, became the department chair there, did that for a year. Northern Kentucky University called, and I jumped across the river, and I've been at NKU for over 20 years. I'm now a full professor. I helped design the media aspect of the incredible building that we're in. I've had students and graduates who are in every station in the market. They're in Chicago, New York, LA, around the world. I've been able to teach around the world with my students as I take them on study abroads, and we've made media in South Africa, Belize, Sri Lanka. It's been pretty incredible. But once we started to get that financial stability, we needed to revisit that original conversation from our first date. Should we adopt? Well, I remember thinking that throughout this whole process that all of this may have been God saying, you shouldn't be a father. But I also knew that Kim was going to be a wonderful mother, and I might be able to live up to the example that my dad gave me. So we started the process. And a whole lot of paperwork and a lot of delays later, halfway around the world, we were able to meet our daughter, Zoa. She was 10 months old. And I distinctly remember riding the bus between Fuling and Chongqing, and Zoa was sleeping on Kim's shoulder, and I knew that what I had always thought was the worst part of my life was actually the best. My perspective had changed on that luck. And that's how we see the world, right? But I realized that if I hadn't had the bilateral, then the path of my life probably wouldn't have been the same. And I probably wouldn't have met my wife. She says that we still would have, maybe. But I'm sure we wouldn't have been matched with our daughter. And if there's anything in these last 30 years that I think I'm pretty good at, and I know she's watching from American University in Washington, D.C. That's my grad school alma mater, where she's studying at the School of International Service, which was probably prompted by the study abroads that she would join us on. And she's watching on a stream that's being provided by my students from NKU. If there's something I'm good at that makes an impact, it's being Kim's husband and Zoa's dad. And what can I say? I'm a lucky man.
One more time for Chris. You know, I've known Chris for decades, and it was only recently that I learned this story about his past and his bout with cancer. First of all, I'm so grateful, of course, that he came here to tell us his story, but also True Theater has just given me like this weird sense of empowerment to talk to people about stories that, you know, from their past that I never would have dug deeper into. And for that, I love True Theater, and I hope, you know, you'll take inspiration from this and think about, you know, asking people that you know who've been in your life for a long time, something just out of the blue that you may not know about them. What was high school like for you? A friend of mine once asked me, hey, did you ever get fired from a job? And I was just like, why'd you ask me that? And it was just like an interesting conversation. I had to call him back later and say, hey, were you trying to tell me that you're getting fired? He's like, no, I was just asking you a question. But that's the kind of thing that, you know, it was my friend Jeff who founded True Theater with me. And it's the kind of thing that this sort of exposure to stories from the people you know, from strangers, just does. And I love it. I hope you do too. If you do, in fact, love it, and you're here as a single ticket holder tonight, you should know that at the box office during intermission, and only at that time, you could turn your single ticket into a subscription for the rest of the season for just $51, which is like if it's $20 a ticket, $60, so that's a $3 ticket discount, and that's pretty good. So if you feel so compelled, the box office will be open, and you could go over there. We have one more storyteller before intermission, and then two more stories after that. So let me remind you that you could give donations by texting TRUE13 to 44321 during the intermission. And you could also play that bingo game. Talk to your neighbor, talk to strangers, see if you could find people who fit the characteristics on the card, write in their name, and turn them into either the basket hero or the basket Ramona will be carrying around during the intermission. Our third storyteller. By day, our next storyteller is the curator of archaeology at the Cincinnati Museum Center. This year marks his 33rd year at the museum. At night, he's a pug aficionado and a beer snob. Day or night, he's a lifelong Cincinnatian who can claim having lived on both sides of town. Currently, not very common, right? Currently, and presumably for the foreseeable future, a West Sider because he says his house is too big to move. Abe Lincoln once said, I'd like to see a man proud of the place in which he lives, and I think Abe would like this guy. And I think you will too. Please welcome Bob Genheimer.
Good evening. When I was a child, I always knew what I wanted to be. I just didn't know what to call it. I was fascinated by the remains of the past. Old bottles, old foundations, even old photographs. And when I saw some of these things in the woods next to my house, it was as if I was the only one who could remember them. And that made me feel special. When I went to the University of Cincinnati, now some 50 years ago last month, yes, it's been that long, I knew I was interested in the past. I just didn't know what to do about it. So I took Intro to History, and I took Intro to Anthropology, where archaeology is taught. I don't remember the history courses, but I do remember the archaeology, and suddenly I was fascinated by the thought of digging things up. I also knew that what I really wanted to do was get my hands dirty. But be careful what you wish for. I have been incredibly lucky. I have been doing professional archaeology for 48 years. I have recorded hundreds of sites, and I have supervised excavations at dozens more. I have been in Native American trash pits that have produced tens of thousands of artifacts. And I have been 20 foot deep in a 19th century outhouse shaft collecting historic treasures. You see, when archaeologists go to sleep at night, we dream about other people's trash. Now, one of the lessons that I have learned in doing archaeology, particularly when you're away from the lab and in rural areas, is that you have to bring all your equipment and essentials with you. Now, I keep most of my small items in my dad's World War II olive drab backpack. It's incredibly heavy, but it's strong. Some of the items I keep in that backpack are trowels, measuring tapes, artifact bags, a change of socks, and yes, and especially, toilet paper. Such was the case about 30 years ago when I and some colleagues were working on a 2,000-year-old Native American site in Warren County. It was a beautiful day, bright blue skies, a soft, gentle breeze, and I had my trusty backpack at my side. What could go wrong? Well, apparently, my intestines could. We had just had lunch and returned to work when I noticed that something that I ate didn't agree with me. And I realized I had to take a shit. Now, I should tell you that I have a shit rule, R-U-L-E. You may also have one. The shit rule simply states, you don't talk about your shit to other people. So if you come up to me at a party and start talking about your shit, I'm going to the other side of the room. But tonight, and one night only, I am going to violate that shit rule just a bit. So back to the story. When I realized I had to go to the bathroom, I had a couple of options. I could take my trusty backpack with its emergency supply of toilet paper and a shovel and make the long walk to the woods. Or I could get in my car and drive into town. I chose the latter. And the reason I chose that is because what I really wanted to do was shit inside of a building like a normal person does. Right? So that's what I did. I left my backpack behind and I started for the car. Now, my car was at the end of this long straightaway on a rural country road, about 1/3 of a mile from where we were digging. It was a pretty good walk. So I started down to the car. Everything is going really, really well until I get a little more than halfway to the car. And I realized I wasn't going to make it into town. In fact, I wasn't so sure I was going to make it to the car. But unfortunately, where I was standing was not wooded. It was open fields on both sides of the road. I had no choice but to make it to the car, so I took my cramped body down there as fast as I could. And when I got to the car, I thought, "So Bob, now what are you going to use for toilet paper?" So I searched the car. I looked in the glove box. I looked in the center console. I looked under the seats. I even looked in the trunk. Nothing. Not even a used McDonald's napkin. Now, anyone who knows me, and there are people in the audience tonight who do know me, they know that I am not a neat freak. And I realized that my wife at the time must have cleaned the car. You could say I was shit out of luck. So at this point, I looked rather dejectedly towards the woods along the side of the road, and I thought, well, it looks like I'm down to leaves. Now, I know I said I wanted to get my hands dirty, but this is not what I meant. So I started walking towards the woods, and I got just inside the tree line, and something stopped me. It wasn't something I saw. It was something I heard. So I backed out of the woods a few steps, and I looked down the long straightaway, and there was a car coming towards me. And for some reason, everyone in this car was yelling and screaming. And the driver was honking the horn nonstop. And I thought, what is wrong with these people? Are they in some sort of trouble? I have to admit, I was completely mesmerized by this whole affair. But as they got closer and a little closer, I could see that they were teenagers. And it dawned on me, this was the last day of class for graduating high school seniors, and they were celebrating the fact that they would never have to read another book as long as they lived. But as the car got closer and a little closer, my world went into slow motion. I could see their mouths open as they screamed. I could vaguely hear the horn honking, but it was all kind of a dream. You see, there was something else about this car. It was covered from bumper to bumper with toilet paper. I know, right? There were long streams of toilet paper fluttering suggestively in the breeze. There was toilet paper hanging from the bumper, from the windshield wipers, from the doorknobs, and even the mirrors. At this point, I had only one goal in life. How do I get some of this toilet paper? My first thought was, well, I'm just going to walk out in front of the car, wait for them to come to a stop, and then debase myself by walking around collecting the toilet paper as they yelled and screamed at me. I really was that desperate. I really was at this point. But the car was moving much too fast for that. And all I could think about was my mother saying, if you get killed in a car crash, make sure you have on clean underwear. She did say that. So here I was, and what am I going to do? But as luck would have it, right next to where I was standing, the road makes a couple of quick jogs, one to the left and one to the right. You have to slow down to make those turns. And they did. And when they did, a whole bunch of that toilet paper fell off into the road almost right in front of me. Now the car continued around the jogs and disappeared out of sight, still making its racket, but I wasn't interested in the car anymore. Now, I want everyone in this audience to imagine a 30-something-year-old man whose body is so cramped he can hardly walk, crawling across both lanes of this rural country road, gleefully collecting toilet paper. I still remember it. And I didn't collect just what I needed. I collected it all as if I was on litter patrol. So I took my paper, I went into the woods, and I did my business. The shit rule precludes me from saying any more, and I'm sure you'll appreciate it. Now, I am not a religious man, and I don't believe in a God, but I have to admit, for a few brief moments after this miracle, I had second thoughts. But I dismissed those thoughts because I couldn't think of what kind of a God would take an interest in my personal toilet crisis, much less employ screaming teenagers to deliver the goods. I should tell you that for a few years after this event, I kept a square of this toilet paper in my office as a kind of a memento. And people would ask about it, but I was always very vague. You see, I have only told this story very few times to very few people. You just heard it. It's rather unbelievable. I didn't want people telling me that I was full of shit for my toilet paper fairy tale. I will also tell you that I have almost certainly exhausted all my luck for the next several lifetimes based on this event. So if you go out to the parking lot tonight and you look in the trunk of my car, you will find an emergency roll of toilet paper. Thank you.
One more time for Bob. As may be apparent, we're about to take a quick 15-minute intermission. Feel free to visit the box office and turn your single tickets into subscriptions. Donate money to True Theater by texting True13 to 44321, or play your game of bingo. We'll see you back in about 15. One more time for Tim Sweeten. Now would be a good time to tell you that Tim plays with a band of his own creation locally called the Cat's Pajamas. They are a newly formed combo. They play jazz and pop hits from the 30s and 40s by artists like Nat King Cole and Billie Holiday. You could check, go check them out. You can check them out on Facebook if you want to sample their music. Just search for the Cat's Pajamas. The Cat's Pajamas. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate having you here tonight. Before we carry on with our last two stories of the evening, I want to remind you that we're going to be drawing some of these filled out bingo cards after our next storyteller. And if I pull it out and it's got a complete run and your email address is on there, we're going to give you a free ticket to the next show. The 5 I pull out will get their free tickets. So if you want to make sure your card is in there, now's the chance to give it to Ramona. She's walking around right in front of me. Or, run it up here, pass it up to the person in front of you like you used to do in school, and get it in there so, if you can't play, you don't play, you can't win kind of thing. So there it is. All right, so that's some information. Some more information is that if you are watching the storytellers up here tonight and thinking to yourself, oh boy, I have a story that I could tell. Well, we're always looking for stories. We're looking for stories for the next 3 themes that we have for the remainder of the season, and there are many ways that you could submit them. You could write to stories@truetheater.org, remembering we spell theater the fancy way, ending in R-E, or you can go to our website, and there's a Share Your Story page, and even if, there's a box for our next show and the 2 other shows this season, and there's also a box for I have a story you've just got to hear. Some of those stories have forced us to put themes in future shows because we did indeed have to hear them. So don't be afraid to share any story you want through our website. And I think, there's a phone number on there. Don't use that. It only gives you a minute to do it. And if I don't hear your email address right, I can't, it's just, use the other 2 methods. So that's how you submit a story. And I hope we'll hear from you. And by the way, 2 people in our show tonight are here because somebody who knew about True Theater told them that they needed to hear about True Theater and share a story. And so, if you're not one of those people that wants to share a story, even if you are, if you know somebody who'd be like, that would be a person who should, tell them about us. We love stories. We want to share as many as we can. I want to mention, too, that when we're actively looking for stories, you will be alerted if you are on our mailing list or you follow us on social media accounts like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You could find us at most of those places as @TrueTheater, so that's easy. Is that what's up there now? Good. And I want to tell you, too, about a special event coming up in November. This is called An Evening of Hope, and it is part of a national movement to celebrate Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, which is like the week before Thanksgiving. And this event that they're doing as part of the Newport Independent Schools is a storytelling event featuring as the long storyteller, the first African-American gentleman to receive a doctorate in tuba performance, Dr. Richard Antoine White, recently interviewed on Trevor Noah, has got a book out, really interesting fellow. I can't wait to meet him personally. It's a free show. And there's a couple of other storytellers, too, in it. One who works at the Newport schools, helping families dealing with instabilities, and another gentleman who works for the district who experienced homelessness as a child. And True Theater is not really a part of it, but I'm a hired gun on the project, and I've been working with those 2. And I can tell it's going to be a very, very special night, and it's free, and there's a QR code. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll hear about it again, or if you're on our Facebook page, you'll hear about it again. So go check that out. Free, I guess. I can't stress that enough. It's going to be really nice and special. Is that the last thing? Did I have a slide with the themes for the upcoming shows, or did I go right past that? You probably saw them, right? Okay, so friends, home, gift, you got a story, submit. On with the show. All right. Our next storyteller has made a living as an actor for nearly 40 years in film, TV, stage, and commercials. He's also an accomplished playwright whose work has been produced all over, including around the corner at the Cincinnati Fringe Festival. 5 years ago, he was hired not around the corner, but on the corner, practically next door at the School for Creative and Performing Arts, and he says he's thrilled to be returning to True Theater for the 4th time. We're thrilled to have him. Please welcome Kevin Crowley.
David, thank you so much for putting an intermission between me and Bob's shit story. Nobody could follow that, no. It is early February 2011, the Monday morning after the Super Bowl, early in the morning, and I am driving east just outside of Indianapolis on I-64. If you recall, 2011 was kind of a brutal winter, a lot of snow and ice. I get into the left-hand lane to pass a truck. Unfortunately, there's a truck in front of me that isn't going anywhere. And so I'm stuck with a truck to my right and a truck in front of me and traffic backing up behind me. And this goes on for several miles at 70 miles an hour, moving gridlock. Suddenly, I see the truck to my right signal that he's coming into my lane. And I think, no, please don't. And I hit my horn, but I'm driving a Subaru Outback, and it's February, everybody's windows are up, and it sounds like a clown car, so here he comes, and I try to squeeze over as far left as I can get, but the shoulder has become a mound of ice and snow that the plows have put there. And he makes contact, and my passenger window explodes, and glass shatters everywhere, and I am hurtling across a median, and I can't steer, and I can't brake, and I am left in the hands of fate. And this all happened at a time when I had lost several significant people. 5 years earlier, my family and I had come back to Cincinnati from Los Angeles, and we did so for several reasons. For 35 years, I had made a living as an actor. And then in the early 2000s, reality TV came into vogue, and it took a lot of the work away. Before that, a working stiff like me could do a guest spot on a sitcom or a one-hour drama, a couple commercials, some voiceover, a play, and make a decent living. That all changed with reality TV. Producers figured out, why would I pay the Friends $1 million an episode when I can put 12 people on an island or in a house and get the same ratings? The formula, I was told, was very simple. Sleep deprivation and lots of alcohol, and you get cat fights. I guess that's what the public preferred. The second reason, we had bought our house in 1996 in Hollywood, and at that time, Hollywood Boulevard was crack dealers and prostitutes, and they were drag racing down Hollywood Boulevard on the weekends. And in 2006, Disney bought an old theater, and the Kodak Theater, which now houses the Oscars, came along, and all that changed. And I wasn't prescient enough to see 2008 coming, the collapse of the housing bubble, but everybody I knew was going out on weekends and flipping houses like it was a Monopoly game. And I told my wife at the time, we're sitting at the poker table with a stack of chips. It's time to cash out. And that stack of chips became our son's college education. And finally, the last reason is because both my parents were east of the Mississippi, and my dad at that time had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I did not want to be racing to catch a plane to say goodbye to either of my parents. So we bought a house in Marymount and rented a childhood for our kids. That's a Marymount joke. It's a little unreal. In the first 4 years back, my dad was in relatively good health, but in the fall of 2010, we were told the cancer was back and there was nothing they could do. Before I knew that, I had agreed to do a play in St. Louis, True West. It was a play I'd long wanted to do, and it was being directed by a friend, so I agreed to do so. So when I left to begin rehearsals in January of 2011, I stopped at my dad's house, January 12th to be specific, and it was tough. He was in hospice care at that time and in and out of consciousness, and there wasn't much I could do except hold his hand, tell him I love him, and I got in my car and drove to St. Louis. Started rehearsals on Thursday, but by Saturday, his wife called to say, you better get back. There was a blizzard approaching, and I told my friend who was the director, I need to get back. And he said, just give me a couple hours rehearsal. We rehearsed in the morning, I got in the car in the afternoon, and drove back. St. Louis to Cincinnati is a 6-hour drive. I made it in 4. By the time I got back, my dad was still alive, but his organs were shutting down and he was no longer conscious. I hugged him. I told him to go join his mom and dad and the family that had gone before him. And several hours later, he took his last breath. Let me tell you something about my dad. He was one of 10 children of Bridge and Specs Crowley, the proprietors of Crowley's Highland House on Matt Adams, where I suspect many of you had your first illegal beer. He was in the Navy. He was a social worker. He ran the children's home at Fort Mitchell. He was in Bosnia during the war and in Romania following the fall of Ceausescu. And he was a 4-term city councilman here in Cincinnati. And though he traveled the world, he was so proud of his hometown and never failed, when I had friends visiting, to take them around and talk up the city and tell them, for example, Mount Adams was named after John Quincy Adams when he came here to christen a telescope when there was an observatory up there. And I would say, Dad, nobody cares. But he was also my best friend. His visitation was attended by a U.S. congressman, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and a homeless man who my dad had given his coat to. I gave the eulogy at his funeral, and then I went back to St. Louis to continue with the show. The show was pretty well received, but I was struggling, honestly. I mean, I was away from my family when I needed them most, and ironically, the play, if you know it, is about two brothers and their power struggle in a fatherless family. So after a couple weeks, I had a break, and I was going to come home and see my family for the first time in a while, when I got news that Joyce Sloan had passed away. Now, Joyce Sloan is the producer of The Second City. Second City is where I started my professional career. Any professional success I've had came because of that place. And if you don't know Second City, it's an improvisational theater in Chicago that's going to be celebrating its 63rd year there and has produced arguably the greatest comedic talent in this country. Steve Colbert, Steve Carell, Tina Fey, John Belushi, John Candy, Chris Farley, Amber Ruffin, Keegan-Michael Key, the list goes on and on. They're all alumni. It was a fabulous place to work. While I was there, I lived across the street from Wrigley Field and had a rooftop. Now, this was before the Cubs had lights. So this was my typical day. Sleep till noon, get up, go on the roof, watch the Cubs lose, ride my bike to Second City, do a show, improvise, go out, ride my bike home, rinse and repeat. It was heaven. And I didn't know it because I was 25 and stupid. But Joyce was a very special person, and those of us who went through Second City knew that. She was generous to a fault. She ran a resale store that the proceeds went to a hospital, a local hospital, and where many of us bought clothes and furnishings for our apartment when we were first starting out. So the news of her loss 2 weeks after my father's was pretty devastating for me. And so I altered my plans. I was now going to drive to Cincinnati for a day, see my family, drive up to Chicago for Joyce's funeral, and then come back to St. Louis. So I did the show on a Sunday. Some reason, the producers of True West had scheduled a Sunday evening performance opposite the Super Bowl. Nothing should ever be scheduled opposite the Super Bowl. This is true. My wife went into labor with our second child during a Super Bowl years earlier, and I almost called her a cab. I did not. So we did the show for two people, and early the next morning I got up and started my drive. Now there are two routes between St. Louis and Cincinnati. You can go north up through Indianapolis or south through Louisville. By fate or luck, I chose the northern route, which is how I found myself veering across this icy median after having been hit by a truck. I see that I'm headed towards oncoming traffic, and there are two trucks coming at me. There's nothing I can do. I didn't see my life flash in front of me, but I thought I might see Joyce and my dad a lot sooner than I had anticipated. Somehow I shoot the gap, and I end up facing the direction I'd just come, west, on I-64. And I'm sitting there hyperventilating, what just happened? And I get a knock, there's a motorist at my window, says, dude, are you okay? I said, yeah, I think so. And he goes, that looked like something out of NASCAR. I got glad I could make your day. The EMTs and sheriff showed up. The EMTs asked if I were okay. I looked down and my fingertips were bleeding from the glass. And I said, do you have any Band-Aids? And they said, no, just defibrillators, and got in their ambulance and left. The sheriff couldn't figure out why I was facing the direction I had just come. I couldn't either. My car was totaled, but I was not. So he got a tow truck. And I spent most of that day in some little Indiana village in a diner where the biggest pastime seemed to be chain smoking, waiting for a rental car. Now, apparently, the Super Bowl is a big day for rental cars, and then people are too hungover to return them. So by the time I got a rental car, I had lost a day. So I changed my plans. Now I would just go directly to Chicago for Joyce's funeral and come back home later. Outside of Chicago, I get hit with another blizzard, nearly whiteout conditions. But by this time, I am maniacal, and I have the window down, and I'm screaming out the window, "This is the best you got! You can't kill me!" I don't know who I was talking to, but I never did figure out who was driving the truck, and I wonder to this day whether they even knew what happened. But I will tell you this. To this day, when I'm driving on the freeway and I have to pass a truck, I get PTSD bad. My heart races, my palms get sweaty. It's nearly debilitating. A lot of people I tell the story to say, well, Joyce and your dad were there and they steered your car to safety. And I said, why would they send a truck to in the first place? I guess I don't really believe in that stuff. Luck, however, is something I do believe in. It's intangible and unknowable, but I believe it's real. A hot streak at a card table, a great parking space with a broken meter, or you walk into a coffee shop and you meet somebody that you get to know for the rest of your life. Maybe it's related to karma. I don't know. But whatever it is, I had it that day, and it saved my life. Thank you.
One more time for Kevin. Before we bring out our final storyteller, I've got all the bingo cards here, and I'm mixing them up and not being able to know what order that they were in or are in now. And I will randomly take 5 from them at this moment, and then I will read you the people who each will win a ticket. We have your email addresses, so I'll take one off the back so that nobody thinks it was impossible if I was in the back. And we will send you your e-tickets or email you and tell you how all that's going to go down. I think I've just taken 5 out of here, so thank you for playing, all of you, and congratulations to Russell and Gunther Staubach, Terry Kent, Meadow Staubach, that family is coming back, Sandra Miller, and Dan Toms. Thank you all for playing. We hope you had a good time meeting your neighbors. Also, this is the last time I'll bring it up, but if you feel so compelled to make a donation to True Theater at any point, today, tomorrow, any time in your life, why don't you just go ahead and go to our website to the donate page or text the code TRUE13 to 44321. And I tell you what, during season 14, it'll probably be True 14. So even in the future, you're like, what are they doing today? I'm going to just text them. Do it. That'll be really cool. No amount too big, too small. Honestly, we could use it. So there you are, and that's the final plug for that. Hey, folks, last but not least, our final storyteller tonight is a Louisville, Kentucky native whose report cards regularly said, talks too much. He considers himself lucky to have split a 35-year career between radio and live music venue management, working at such places as WEBN, 96 Rock in Atlanta and Cincinnati, and 2 stints at our local music venue, Bogart's. Man, that brings me back, right? And he tells us his lucky number is 13. How perfect that he's here with us to help us kick off our 13th season. Please give it up for Michael Finn Walter.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. Please sit down. Please take your. Oh, that's embarrassing. High school, right? How big was high school? It's pretty big. Big building, bigger than your grade school, probably. Bigger expectation, bigger pressure, bigger opportunities, bigger everything. And if you could go from grade school to high school with a friend, that would be great. With a best friend, even better. I was lucky enough to go to high school with two of my best friends from grade school. We did everything together. We sports and we did clubs and different things. And outside of school, David and Mark, I'll call them David and Mark for the sake of the story and also because that's what their parents named them. But David and Mark and I would get together and spend the night at each other's house, and we would sneak out in the middle of the night, and then we would get caught sneaking out in the middle of the night and get grounded for getting caught sneaking out in the middle of the night, and then we'd serve our sentence for a couple of weeks, our grounding, and then we would get together at somebody's house a couple weeks later, and we'd do it again because that's what you did. Sneaking out was apparently the thing to do back then. But the bottom line is our families were all very close. I felt like a member of their family. I felt like they felt like they were a member of my family. But there was a difference between their families and my family. And Mark and Dave both are adopted, and from a very early age, they knew it. Dave, as a matter of fact, was one of 5 adopted children in his family. I think I'm thinking about it, his youngest sibling was 7 or 8, and his oldest was in his early 20s, and he was one of the middle 3. And I remember distinctly being over at their house during every teenager's favorite moment, and that is when your best friend is getting yelled at by their mother. And I did what we all do. I kind of shrunk back into the shadows, and I'm like, I don't want to be here. And I don't really remember what he was being yelled at for. It was not, I don't think it was something he did. I think it was something he was supposed to do that he didn't do. But I do remember what happened next. He looked at his mom, and he said, I don't have to listen to you. You're not my real mother. Yeah. I went from shrinking to whoop like that, and I ran right out under the door. I'm like, holy shit, did he just say that to his mom? And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, he doesn't know how lucky he is. I mean, 5 adopted children in the same household, and a pretty sweet gig. They had a pretty sweet gig. But he's really lucky that he didn't get backhanded out into the front yard for having said that to his mom. And I just remember, I don't know if I said it out loud. I probably did later, but I'm like, God, if that's what that's like, I am so glad that I'm not adopted. So this is probably a weird segue, but it's a good time to introduce you to my sister. My sister is one of 4 of us, my dad, my mom, me, and her. My dad, big guy, thick, wavy, dark hair, left-handed. My mom wore a bouffant like nobody's business, a bouffant filled with thick, dark, wavy hair. My mom, left-handed. Me, born with full head of dark hair, which later became wavy and curly, and I'm told mullet-y. Thick, dark, wavy hair. Me, left-handed. My sister, whisper-thin blonde hair, right-handed. A true Targaryen. You guys aren't brother and sister. Knock it off. What color hair did your milkman have? Yeah, I know how old you are if you clapped at the milkman. He was bald, by the way, so who knows. But she is, and will always be my sister. My sister, who when she was 14-ish and I was 16-ish, 2 years apart, we were home one night when my mom and dad went out to dinner. and she sat on the end of the couch watching TV. I went downstairs with the dog, threw on my headphones, cranked up the music, sat down behind a drum kit I should never have been allowed to own, got out my sticks, and just started assassinating probably the first 10 seconds of Rock and Roll by Zeppelin. I feel certain My Sharona by the Knack was in there, and a handful of other songs to whose original artist I owe massive apologies. But nevertheless, during this musical massacre, at one point I look over the end of the drums, and the dog is up on all fours, back is arched, hair standing straight up, mouth open. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? So I yank my headphones off, my ears are ringing because the music was too loud. And over the ringing of the ears and the dog, I hear my sister screaming my name upstairs. So 16-year-old tough guy me runs around the drums, grab a golf club. It's probably a 7-iron. I'm pretty good with a 7-iron. And took the stairs 3 at a time. I got to the top, and I spun around, and she was sitting in the same place. A couple of key differences. She was frozen, but quaking like this and crying, and she had open in her lap this big, thick book. And the book, it's a baby book. For those of you who don't have kids or were never babies, a baby book is a big thing that your parents keep that they want you to take and you don't want it. But it has your first drawing of your hand, the first footprint, the first ribbon you ever got, the first time you tried to write mom instead of dad. And she was sitting there, and I said, is somebody in the house? What is going on? She's like, no. She's just shaking her head and looking at me. I go, she said, no. I said, well, what the hell is wrong with you? And she held up her hand, and in her hand, she had this little pink card. And she handed me the card, and she said, what is this? And I looked at it, and in what I reverentially refer to as old lady cursive was written information about an infant. Pounds and ounces and inches. I don't think we were cool enough to do centimeters then. And it said Our Lady's Home for the Innocents or something like that on it. And I looked at it and I flipped it over a couple of times. I thought, uh-oh. I got to figure out what to explain to her that this might be. I didn't know what it was, but I had a pretty good idea that she thought I did. So I sat down with her, I sat next to her, and I just wanted to get her to calm down. I said, well, let me ask you, can you just calm your breathing? That was goal number one. And it gave me a bump to think, what can I do to help here? So it was during that split-second moment that I came up with maybe the smartest thing that ever came out of my mouth when I was talking to somebody else, and I said, what do you think this is? And she looked at me, and not this calmly, she said, I think this means that I'm adopted. And we just sat there for a second, and then Mark and Dave popped into my head because that's what I knew of adoption. So I knew I needed to redirect. And I looked at her and I said, okay, well, let's think this through. I mean, we couldn't Google Our Lady's Home for the Innocents on our rotary phone, so I said, let's think this through. What if that's the case? How cool is that? How cool is that? How lucky is that thing? A couple gets pregnant. They realize they can't give the child the life that they would like to, so they have the courage to give that child up for adoption. Another couple comes along and says, this is exactly the perfect piece for our family. This is exactly what we would like to do. We want to give this child an opportunity. I said, you were chosen. You were wanted. Mom and Dad had me. A couple years later, they wanted to round out our family, and here we are. And she looked at me and she goes, here, look at this one. It was blue, and it had information on an infant on it, not the same information, and it said Our Lady's Home for the Innocents on it. And so I took the little blue paper-thin cannonball that she had just fired and sat back and the couch was spinning double time, and it was that exact moment when I realized how different advice tastes than it sounds. So everything I had said had just bounced right back on me. Oh my God, I was wanted, I was selected, in my own head, but I'm like, oh my God. And then she broke it up and she said, please don't tell Mom and Dad, please don't tell Mom and Dad. I don't want to get in trouble. Because I guess these cards had been like in an envelope that was tucked away in the binder. They weren't there for general discovery, I'll say. I said, no worries, I got this. You should probably go to bed before they get home. So they get home, she's in bed. My mom and dad are in bed getting ready to call it a night. My dad's in brushing his teeth or doing whatever. And my mom is laying on the bed, flipping through what I will bet you $1,000 right now was People magazine. And I hopped up on the bed next to her, and she looks at me, she goes, oh, you getting ready for bed? You guys have a good night? I go, yeah. What are these? Go wake up your sister. So I did. And I grabbed her, and the four of us went into the family room. And we sat all night long, early into the morning, talking about how we became the family in that family room. And they told us they couldn't have kids. They weren't assigning blame. There was no he couldn't, she couldn't, none of that. They just wanted this family, and this is the family that they wanted to build. And the plan was to tell us that summer. We were going on a family vacation, and other times when we had gone on vacation, we would go with other families, but mysteriously no one else was able to go with us this particular year. So that's when they were going to tell us, hoping she would be old enough to understand, I would be old enough to help her if she didn't, especially if they weren't around. So we skipped school the next day, because like I said, we were up way early into the morning, and I think it was a Friday because it gave us each kind of the long weekend to process and spend more time talking amongst ourselves to process what we had learned. Now, every good news story has a who, what, where, when, why, and how. Early on, she focused very much on the who. Who were these mystery people? Who were they? Who were they? Who were they? And by proxy, who am I? I was more focused on the how and the what and the what if. How in the hell had no one in my family, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, ever slipped up and said something to one of us where we didn't go, what the fuck are you talking about? And then it was time to ask questions that for at the time, I guess there were no proper answers. And I talked to my cousin years later about that, and she said, well, you know what, you were brought home as infants. We just assumed you all were natural-born killers, and you were just part of the family from the get-go. It never occurred to us, which, if you're a cousin, that's the perfect answer. So, but I went from the how then to the what. And the what. What's it going to be like when I go back to school on Monday? And I see, for instance, Mark and Dave. So I went back to school, and as expected, I walked in, and it was different. I looked at them like I had never seen them before. And they looked at me, in my mind, because there's no way they knew what I newly knew, but it still in my head looked like they were looking at me like they had never seen me before. Everybody, I felt like, was looking at me like they had never seen me before. And that didn't last forever, and I knew it was absurd, but that's how it felt. And it lingered for a bit, but that's when it got weird. Because then, that day, I went home, and I pulled back up on my home, and I looked at my house. And I looked at my neighbor's house. And that's when what turned into what if. Because these are the strangest people I've ever called neighbor in my entire life. The only thing that was missing was a big top over their house. And I thought, what if they had adopted me and these people were my neighbors? That doesn't go away very quickly either. You do that a lot. And it kind of forced me back into the understanding, yeah. I was chosen. I'm supposed to be here. I was wanted. We both were. And this is where we belong. And my sister over the years would sometimes go back to the who, and she would kind of wonder aloud occasionally. I think it's subsided now, about her birth parents. I didn't. The only thing that's probably changed for me is I've told this story to people in different, never like this, but the thing that's changed is I have lowered my level of wanting to chirp or bark at somebody who asks the inevitable question. A question that I would bet you, if you know somebody or met somebody that was adopted, you have asked. And I would just suggest next time, think it through as to how you ask this question. You know what the question is? Do you ever want to find your real parents? I found my real parents. How lucky am I that they found me?
One more time for Finn. Michael, Finn, Walter, and all our storytellers tonight. Star, Chris, Bob, Kevin, Michael, Tim Sweeten, our friends at Norse Media, our friends at Memorial Hall. Thank you in advance for all the donations that are going to be pouring in. Hope maybe we'll see you in November in Newport for the Evening of Hope, and maybe back here on January 26th for True Friend. But until next we see you, be true.